The Trump administration has designated Iran's Revolutionary Guards as a foreign terrorist organization. The US president announced the decision on Monday, repeating accusations that the elite force both finances and promotes terrorism.
Today, I am formally announcing my administration's plan to designate Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, including its Quds Force, as a foreign terrorist organization.
I discussed the recent developments with our correspondents Caleb Maupin in New York and Paula Sleer in Tel Aviv.
This will be the first time that we've seen the U.S. government designate part of another country's government as a terrorist organization. Now, Donald Trump, in the statement, he accuses Iran of being a state sponsor of terrorism, of financing, promoting terrorism as a tool of statecraft. And we heard those words echoed by Mike Pompeo, the U.S. Secretary of State. He said this designation of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as terrorists is intended to send a message to Iranian leaders.
The leaders of Iran are racketeers, not revolutionaries. The Iranian people deserve better than to be governed by this cadre of hypocritical and corrupt officials. With this designation, we are sending a clear signal, a clear message to Iran's leaders, including Qasem Soleimani and his band of thugs, that the United States is bringing all pressure to bear to stop the regime's outlaw behavior. We ask that our allies and partners around the world do the same.
In response to this designation by the U.S. government, the Iranian government has now declared the U.S. Central Command and the U.S. military to be terrorists. And we've also heard from Javad Zarif, the foreign minister of Iran, and he has spoken up and said this is another move by Washington that could lead to further isolation of the United States.
Netanyahu firsters, who have long agitated for FTO designation of the IRGC, fully understand its consequences for US forces in the region. In fact, they seek to drag the US into a quagmire on its behalf. Donald Trump should know better than to be conned into another US disaster.
The Trump administration has particularly distinguished itself by escalating its rhetoric against the Islamic Republic of Iran, distinguishing itself from the Obama administration that presided over the P5+1 nuclear negotiations. But the Trump administration has escalated U.S. sanctions and hostility toward the Islamic Republic.
Everywhere we go in the Middle East, it's Iran, Iran, Iran.
Spread death, destruction, and chaos.
Behind every problem is Iran,
the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism.
Iran's leaders sow chaos, death, and destruction.
Now, it's important to note that fighters from Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps were actually key in defeating the ISIL terrorists. Many Islamic Revolutionary Guards of Iran actually died in the efforts to defeat the ISIL terrorists. However, this organization that was key in defeating the ISIL-Daesh terrorist organization and made great sacrifices in order to fight against ISIL has now been labeled itself as terrorists by the U.S. government.
OK, Caleb, thanks for outlining that for us. Let's go to Tel Aviv now and talk to our Middle East correspondent, Paula Sleer. I guess there's one happy, albeit embattled, Prime Minister where you are.
There's certainly one happy Prime Minister here, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He's hoping that this comment that comes just hours before polls open here in Israel will boost his election chances. He has thanked the American President Donald Trump for these comments.
Thank you, my dear friend, President Donald Trump, for your decision to declare Iran's Revolutionary Guards a terrorist organization. Thank you for responding to another important request of mine, which serves the interests of our countries and the countries of the region.
At the same time, though, Netanyahu is facing tough competition, not least of all from a strong military man, Benny Gantz, who is a former Israeli Defense Forces chief. Now, he has positioned himself on the center of the Israeli political spectrum, so he is appealing to those who want Netanyahu out of office. He's talking about negotiations with the Palestinians, and he's also talking about limiting the number of times that an Israeli prime minister can serve in office to 2 terms. Having said this, Netanyahu certainly has his own advantages, not least of all his close relationship with the American President Donald Trump. It was their close working relationship that saw the Americans recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, that saw the Americans move their embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, also recognizing Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, and now the latest feather in Netanyahu's cap is the Americans declaring that the Iranian Revolutionary Guards are a terrorist organization.
For many years, we failed to acknowledge the obvious. the plain reality that Israel's capital is Jerusalem. I will sign a presidential proclamation recognizing Israel's sovereign right over the Golan Heights.
The Jexodus movement encourages Jewish people to leave the Democrat Party. Total disrespect. Republicans are waiting with open arms. Remember Jerusalem, US Embassy, and the horrible Iran nuclear deal.
And yet, despite the assistance that Trump has certainly given Netanyahu, it is still unclear whether the incumbent prime minister will win these elections. These are the closest Israeli elections in recent history. They're also one of the dirtiest. There's been a lot of bad mouthing of candidates and a smear campaign. So it's certainly at this stage unpredictable as to who will come out tops at the end of Tuesday.
We sounded out a number of analysts about Trump's decision on Iran and the extent to which it's perhaps been timed to have an impact on the Israeli parliamentary elections.
Any move against the IRGC would mean reinvigorating terrorist groups like al-Nusra and ISIL or Daesh. And now that the Iraqi parliament is thinking of expelling U.S. army troops from Iraq, it seems that the U.S., which has declared a withdrawal from Syria as well, is sending the message to Tehran that if the U.S. is not given a share in the Middle East, then the U.S. is ready to, turn the table over. In the meantime, tomorrow we will have elections in Israel. This seems to be also a move in support of the Israeli premier. Trump has done anything for Netanyahu, and this is yet another move to show his fervent support, strong support for Netanyahu, in the hope that Netanyahu would reciprocate that and support Trump in next year's elections.
There were so many gifts that President Trump donated to Benjamin Netanyahu before those elections that it's almost an overdose of gifts. I'm not sure the last one will be perceived in Israel as something that will change anything in the way that people will vote. Those elections are about Netanyahu, yes or no. It's almost the only issue at stake, almost the only issue on the table, and almost the only issue which is discussed. It shows that the way that Netanyahu is going is a way that brings Israel support from the United States. This is something that voters might have in their mind, but it will not be in their first priority.